fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The air crackled not with mana, but with static. It tickled my nose, a phantom reminder of old Earth, of motherboard heat sinks and overclocking. I coughed, waving a hand in front of my face, trying to dissipate the strange residue. Around me, the teleportation chamber in Kalar City shimmered, the runes still faintly glowing with residual energy. Well, that asterisk was unpleasant, Amber said, wrinkling her nose. She was already brushing imaginary dust off her leather armor, ever the pragmatist. Next to her, a scowl etched itself onto Kindar's usually jovial face. Unpleasant is an understatement. I felt like I was being squeezed through a greased pig's intestines. He shuddered dramatically, drawing a chuckle from Amber. Stop being dramatic, you two. It's a minor inconvenience compared to the alternative. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Teleportation wasn't getting any smoother, even with Purple fine-tuning the algorithms. The problem was scaling it across interdimensional distances. There was always a residual feedback. This time, it felt almost technological. Whatever, let's just get this over with. I turned to Lorvan, who stood stiffly by the doorway, his face an impassive mask. You said the summons came directly from the king. Lorvan nodded, his gaze unwavering. Indeed, Lord Carlos, an urgent summons. I confess I was surprised. His Majesty rarely issues such direct commands, especially to those newly recognized as High Lords. A summons, wonderful, just when we were settling into our new life at the Wellspring, turning the dragon's blasted clearing into a relatively comfortable home. Purple was busy building the school, Amber was experimenting with new enchantments, and Kindar was finally getting used to being officially recognized as a lord. And now this. What do you think it's about? Kindar asked, his voice laced with apprehension. I shrugged. Could be anything. The rebel uprisings, Darmelkin being, well, Darmelkin, or maybe they just finally need some help with their magical UI. The crown wouldn't dare, Lorvan snapped, his usual composure cracking for a moment. His Majesty is wise and just. Wise and just doesn't mean technologically proficient. Amber raised an eyebrow, and Lorvan huffed, turning away. I suppressed a sigh. Navigating noble sensitivities was always a minefield. All right, let's not speculate. We'll know soon enough. Lead the way, Lorvan. The corridors of the palace were opulent, almost sickeningly so. Gold leaf adorned every surface, tapestries depicting ancient battles hung from the walls, and the air thrummed with the silent power of countless wards and enchantments. It felt stifling, suffocating compared to the open air of the wilds. We were led to a small, private audience chamber. King Elston Kalar wasn't seated on a throne, but stood near a large, ornate window, his back to us. The room was lit by magically infused crystals that cast long, dancing shadows. You requested our presence, Your Majesty, I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. The king turned, and I immediately noticed something was wrong. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were clouded, unfocused. There was a sheen of sweat on his brow, and his movements were jerky, unnatural. High Lords Carlos and Kindar Founder and High Lady Amber, he said, his voice raspy and strained. I have need of your services. Of course, Your Majesty. What is the nature of the need? I prompted, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. He took a deep, shuddering breath. A darkness has taken root within these walls, a corruption I cannot purge it alone. He gestured weakly towards a massive, obsidian-looking chest sitting in the corner of the room. It emanates from that. The chest was unlike anything I had ever seen. It radiated a palpable aura of malice, a feeling of cold dread that seeped into my bones. Even Purple, usually calm and analytical, felt the surge of panic and confusion through our bond. Carlos, something is terribly wrong. That object, it's not magical, not entirely. It's almost like corrupted code. Corrupted code in this world. What the hell was going on? What is that chest, Your Majesty? Amber asked, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. It was a gift, the king gasped, from a visiting dignitary from a land far to the south. He claimed it held potent magic, healing properties. He choked, coughing violently. Healing properties that are slowly killing you, Kindar said, his voice grim. The king nodded weakly. I tried to open it to harness its power, but it resisted. It fought me. Now it festers. We can try to help, Your Majesty, I said, my mind racing. but we need to know what we're dealing with. Can you tell us anything else about this, dignitary?" The king shook his head, his eyes fluttering. I cannot recall. My mind, it is clouded. The chest, it drains me." He swayed on his feet, and Lorvan rushed forward to support him. "Perhaps you should rest, your majesty," Lorvan urged. "Let the high lords and lady examine the chest." The king nodded, his breathing shallow. "Yes, examine it, and be careful, it is insidious." Lorvan helped the king towards a side door, leaving us alone with the chest. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the crystals and the oppressive aura of the object. "Well, this is just great," Amber muttered. "Trapped in a room with a cursed chest and a dying king. How much you want to bet this chest is the reason we were summoned?" "There's no guarantee we can fix this. That thing is screaming corrupted algorithms, but I can't even get close enough to debug it," I sighed. "What's worse is the king is getting worse by the second. If the chest is making him sick, we need to act fast, even if we don't know what we're doing." Kindar swallowed, his hand tightening on the pommel of his sword. "What do? We can't just leave the king to die." "We try," I said, stepping towards the chest. "We try, and we pray Purple can figure out what the hell this thing is before it's too late, but we aren't leaving this room until we fix this or die trying." As I reached out my hand towards the cold, obsidian surface, I felt a surge of energy, a sharp jolt that ran through my entire being. The room blurred, the walls seemed to close in, and the chest pulsed with a dark, malevolent light. Then everything went black. I awoke to find myself not in the opulent audience chamber, but in a cold, damp dungeon cell. Amber and Kindar were beside me, unconscious and chained to the wall. As I looked around and saw the stone room, I saw that the only other item in the room was the black chest now resting in the middle of the room. I tried to use magic, but was unable. As I look at the chest again, I see some writing on the side. "Level 55 required." "Looks like the forced proximity trope is about to start," I said, trying to figure out what was going to happen next.